basically I was surrounded by people that made me think this is doable. I'm curious. I'm going to try it. And so the fifth shift was, okay, so all this energy, all this free time, and also all this new discipline and structure around doing something that was positive for myself, which I think as a kid growing up, like I just saw discipline and structure as something like militant or something for losers. And I could see like the massive transformation in myself. And I just found it kind of, I was going to say addictive.
Do you want to wake up feeling like you're stepping into who you're meant to be, into the best possible version of you? What if I told you that the key to your best life, health, and happiness are all around you? You just have to find what works for you. I'm Hope Pedraza, and I believe that there isn't just one way to live a healthy and meaningful life, and that all you need is a little inspiration to make changes that last from the inside out. Each week, I'll be sharing tangible tips and inspirational interviews to help you on your journey. These are the steps to take to improve your life and live with purpose. This is Hopeful and Wholesome. Hey y'all, welcome back to Hopeful and Wholesome. Today I have on the show my friend Megan Swann. Megan is an integrated wellness coach and strategic advisor specializing in working with high-performance humans, entrepreneurs, leaders, and modern companies to help them thread strategic wellness practices into their existing routines and company culture. In doing so, it enables more sustainable energy, motivation, confidence to achieve their goals without burnout. Now, we are talking today about Megan's journey. And this she had her very own eat, pray, love journey. And she'll talk about that and what landed her to live in Mexico, on the beaches of Mexico, where she was when we were doing our interview. But we talk about that's where that leads us in our conversation about how there is no one size fits all wellness, right? There is no, this is how your journey should look. And so she talks about that and how to really embody your own personal journey, your own personal wellness journey, how to do that, how to create your own personal wellness journey, and what that looks like for her, and how she really made sense of her life and her health. And she talks about this sober curious movement that she held in her own life as she kind of got into the depths of mommy wine culture and how that affected her life and how she was showing up for her family and her kids, and just really how she's been able to shift into owning her own journey. I love this conversation. Megan has so much wisdom to share with y'all. So let's jump in. All right, y'all, let's jump in. I'm here with Megan and we're talking really just all things wellness today. She is a wellness coach and strategic advisor. And so we're just going to see where the conversation takes us on this wellness chat. Thanks so much for joining me today, Megan.
Oh, thanks, Hope, for having me.
Yeah. So let's start out because I learned this. So first of all, you can go follow Megan's podcast as well. I learned this when I did an interview with her on her podcast about her kind of eat, pray, love journey. So can you just talk about kind of your journey and how you got into the wellness space and what that story looks like for you?
Yeah, totally. Well, I jokingly say that yoga was like my gateway drug into the wellness industry. But even after discovering yoga, I've lived like a double life for many years in our point as women to really care more about what we're putting into our bodies when we find out we're pregnant, right? So that was like another catalyst for me. So I kind of was in the wellness space as a yoga teacher, but there were still like multiple levels that I was not aware of in my life until I got pregnant. And then I was super conscious of all the things I was putting in my body and arguably even a bit obsessed about taking care of my first pregnancy. And that kind of spilled over into the second, but it wasn't until I never got my sleep back as a new mom. Like my kids were even like 2 and 4. And I had just adapted to living on 5 hours a night and thinking like, this is what my life's going to look like from now on. Like past the chocolate, past the red wine, I was like, again, living this sort of double life in the wellness sphere where I'm a new mom, really health conscious in theory, not getting enough sleep, teaching yoga as my profession and like sort of, being an inspiration to a lot of other women and taking care of themselves in other ways. But there were just pieces of the puzzle that I hadn't quite figured out yet. And it wasn't until I was actually by one of my private yoga students signed up to do the IIN certification. And she said, hey, will you be, thought, sure. I didn't really think there was a lot she was going to teach me, to be quite honest. It was a little naive of me. And so our first session, she listened to, all the ins and outs of what I was doing, my routine and what I was eating and not eating and all that. And the fact that I wasn't sleeping. And she suggested a few things, but one of which that was key was having a more intentional morning routine. And I thought she was crazy. She's 10 years my junior, doesn't have children.
What could she possibly know?
Yeah. She's suggesting that the solution to getting more sleep is to get up, set my alarm to get up 15 minutes earlier and meditate and, a bunch of Ayurvedic cleansing rituals like oil pulling and scraping my tongue and dry brushing and a few yoga postures. And like, this is going to be the solution to all of my problems. I really thought, I won't say what I thought. I didn't say out loud to her either, but I only did it because I had literally signed a contract with her saying that I was going to be an active participant in this experiment. And that for 2 weeks, I would take her suggestions and then report, what happened or what I experienced. And long story short, that was almost 7 years ago now. Now my morning routine is a non-negotiable hour. Mm-hmm. I happily get up at often 4:40 something just to have time to myself as a mom. And I'm certainly a lot more flexible about what my morning routine needs to look like every day. And also sometimes it's sort of chunkated, like I get 25 minutes to myself and then it's, mom mode for 40 minutes. And then I get the second half, if you will, of my morning routine when they're at school. But yeah, so that was a really long-winded answer. And I didn't even get into the Eat, Pray, Love bit, but that's the threads of
it's good. And it's so funny how you're not the first person that I've talked to where they were like, oh, yoga was my gateway drug to this or that, whatever. So I think it's hilarious that you said that because I've heard it before. And it's just so funny, the things that lead us in the way we want to go. And then the other piece I picked out of that, because I totally resonate where you were like, I didn't really think she was going to have anything to teach me. Like, what could she possibly find? Like, I felt the same way when I went through my FDN training some years back where I'm like, I'm a healthy person. Like, what can I possibly find in these labs? And holy crap, like my adrenals were like hanging on by dear life. So it's crazy how you think you got it all together and you're like, oh, I know everything. What could I possibly? Yeah, I think that's funny because I totally resonate with that.
Yeah. And back to the yoga world, like I think let's not go too far down that rabbit hole because it's a massive topic. But, I've really shifted my relationship with the yoga world. In the beginning, I needed the dogma and the structure that it provided. But now I like all wellness tools that I've implemented or experimented with over the years. It really comes down to making it your own and giving yourself permission to personalize it so that it makes sense for you. And, it never made sense to me as an Ashtanga yogi to wake up and do 2 hours of Mysore a day. Like that's just never been me. And also yoga is integral in my life and has many, many benefits, but I don't practice it like the quote unquote experts in the Ashtanga yoga world would say is necessary to gain the benefit. Right.
Right. I mean, I think that's true for everything. And I like that you brought that up because like even you talking about your morning routine, there's a lot of, I'm using air quotes here of like thought leaders and whatever you want to call them, influencers, whatever, that are they're so passionate about the morning routine, but it's such a, like you're saying, it's a really dogmatic thing. But for you, like you just explained yours, like some days I do it this way, some days I do it that way, where it's like either way, you're giving yourself that time and that space for yourself, but it can look different every day. And the same with yoga. Like it doesn't have to look this way or that way. You can personalize it. I think that's the important piece is knowing that like your wellness, anything in your wellness routine or whatever, like it doesn't have to look a certain way.
Yeah. I say there is no one size fits all wellness, which is hard to market. Therefore, the industry really thrives on these quick fix solutions that are going to save everybody the same way. And it's just not realistic. It's not how it works.
Right. Totally. Because life happens and which leads me to what I had originally asked you about the Eat, Pray, Love moment, because things don't always happen the way you think they are. So you want to speak to kind of your journey with that part of your life?
Yeah. So I discovered, so I did the yoga teacher training thing, thinking it was going to be my side gig living in Toronto. I'm in my 30s and really trying to break into the non-for-profit ironic because, it's a industry to be in. But I was really passionate about human rights and making a difference, doing something that made a difference on a sort of macro scale is where I saw myself being. And it just, I believe that the universe intentionally made it not work out. I had some close calls and for many reasons, most of which I wasn't getting where I thought I wanted to be in my career, and I also had this relationship at the time where he's like, yeah, I'm just not ready. We've been, off and on for 6 years and he just wasn't ready to settle down. He wanted to go travel the world and not with me. And yeah, so I went and traveled the world first was kind of my thinking after it being this long drawn out thing where I'm like, I'm 30. I was obsessed with this book and it just seemed like it was a now or never situation. I didn't have this relationship, or at least not how I wanted it. I didn't have kids. Like there was really nothing holding me there. Right. And I knew later in life, it would be hard to just, cut and go. So it sparked by the fact that my mom and her husband for many, many years have spent March in, somewhere along the Pacific coast of Mexico. Mm-hmm. And they invited me on my 30th birthday to join them for a week in Puerto Vallarta. And I won't get too far into it, but, essentially I rediscovered myself through a DJ and a night of dancing in Puerto Vallarta. Simple, but I've had a moment where I felt like I hadn't felt in so many years, pre multiple relationships that really had made me question my values and all that stuff. So yeah, I was just inspired. So I came back from Mexico. It's like the height of the H1N1 virus. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
High incidents of narco news in all the international papers. It's like nobody's talking about even going to Mexico, let alone moving to Mexico.
Yep.
And I'm just like, yeah, I'm moving to Mexico and then I'm going to spend a year there and a year in Bali. And then I'll, see where the universe takes me. And long story short, it's almost 14, it'll be 14 years in November. And I'm still on my first stop.
You never made it out.
I'm still going to go to Bali. still on the bucket list. Still on the list. And now as a mom of two, I dream of going on a yoga retreat by myself there one day. We'll see.
Totally. I had a friend who just went on a yoga retreat there. She just got back last month. So yeah, what a crazy story. What do you think for you? You said when you went the first time and you kind of rediscovered yourself, what do you think? And you don't have to, you can share whatever you feel like sharing from that piece, but I'm curious to know what it was for you that you felt like, did you feel like you found something that you didn't know about yourself? Did you feel like you found something that was missing? How was that? What was that kind of realization for you?
Well, I think it was more, I just hadn't felt seen and hadn't felt just that sort of inner child, young woman energy that I had felt we could go down a long story, but I mentioned the one relationship where it was, we weren't in alignment. And the previous to that, I was married. So my first marriage was, a learning experience. Let's just say.
As they are.
And I was most people who knew me would have never guessed that I was ever going to get married, let alone married at 23. I mean, it was just like a series of bad things, right? But that relationship was really ultimately toxic. And it really shook me in terms of my self-worth and making me question what was I was capable of, and just making me feel like in some sort of box that I wouldn't have put myself in previously. And so over years, you kind of just start buying into these things, other people's visions of you.
Yes.
And that was what I really felt like I shed. What happened is, at this club, friends of friends took me there, and it was very early, meaning only 12 o'clock at night.
Early for Mexico time.
No one, and it's a floor up from where the dance floor is. Literally no one on the dance floor except me. But had several tequila shots, if not, I had a lot to drink. I'm dancing by myself, not so far gone that I through a moment clearly that just dancing a specific song. And eventually the DJ comes down and he's like, I just love watching you dance. And I said, I thought he was hitting on me at first and, maybe he was, because ultimately that's where it led. But he's like, you just dance like no one's watching, like you don't care. You're just in the moment. And that really took me to how I used to feel about myself and a level of confidence and sort of inner ease that I hadn't been in touch with for many years.
Yeah. That's crazy. It's crazy that somebody recognizing that in you, like pulled it out of you. That's crazy.
Yeah. I find that you have these sort of spiritual encounters, if you will, often with people that, they're not in your life for a really long time.
Yes.
I remember I had a conversation when I was 15 with a gentleman coming back. I was au pairing in San Francisco and I was 16. And it was just the way he was talking to me as if I was an adult and the questions he was asking me.
Yeah.
It just made me see myself completely differently.
100%. I feel that so much. That happened to me. I too was married super young and it didn't last long. And I had a friend at the time. And again, it was one of those things where she wasn't in my life for very long. And then we just I moved a different part of town. We just kind of lost touch. But at the time it was like her directness and like about this, basically she was just like, you need to get yourself together and figure out who you are without this man, right? Without this marriage, without this man, like your identity is tied up in this. And it was so harsh at the moment. I was like, oh my God, like, it hurts me to, but it was like what I needed to hear. And I will never forget the conversation we had and she was just so direct and to the point. And I was so offended at the time, but then I'm like, well, crap, like that was literally like the start of the rest of my life. So it was what I need to hear. So I totally resonate with that, like the right people that show up and you have these kind of spiritual encounters or wake up moments like, okay, well, needed to hear that.
It doesn't always have to be offensive, but yeah, right. I also had, more recently, I had one of those conversations. Initially, I was like punch to the stomach and then, right. All right. No, there's some good points here. Here's some gold. If I take my hurt feelings layer off of this is really something to examine.
Exactly. And I'm curious to hear kind of this, because you have another part of your, I guess, journey. I'll say journey. I find that's such like a cliche word, but I mean, what else are you going to call it? But
it's a great word, but yeah, I agree. It's overused.
Yes, totally. I want to dig into kind of this like sober curious movement that you've dove into and kind of how that's shown up for you with you as a mom of two. And there's, this mommy wine culture that's kind of in the forefront of society right now and kind of what your journey has been through with that.
Yeah. I'll give you some quick context. So I grew up, my father was an alcoholic. I grew up in, I would say, a society, but certainly friend circles and family cultures where, wine was a part of a nice dinner, everything involved celebration, also involved some level of alcohol consumption. And just like a real normalizing of alcohol, not necessarily on the daily, but, quite consistently throughout my life. And so it really wasn't, I don't think I really questioned it at all until I got to the point of motherhood where I just could not show up in an integral way consistently when I was drinking. And I guess I attribute the gift of many that my children given me was this completely normalized by society break or window of sobriety because I was pregnant, then breastfeeding, then pregnant, breastfeeding. So it was almost like 4 years where I had very little, sip of wine here or there, maybe like not consistent. Like I really wasn't really noticing that my body was not craving it during those times where naturally, of course, it's like the least ideal. And when I did have the odd Christmas or whatever, and you kind of want to participate in the social, whatever, the cheers, what do we call it? The toast. I would have a sip and my body would just be like, oh no, like that is toxic. And so that kind of stuck with me, but I was still looking forward in theory to getting back to my previous level of, sharing a bottle of red with my husband over dinner or on date night and all these sort of normal consumption of wine. Like I was, my 20s, I was being into, that was vodka tonic or Red Bull and all this other crap. But, my 30s and 40s, it was red or wine, at least wine. So I really started well, of course. So the wellness, working with a coach, I think brought it to my attention, because at this point I worked with as the guinea pig client, if you will, for about 2 months before I signed up to the same gym with IIN. And that's how I got started on my personal coaching journey. And so going through that, I was a different lens, and I was starting to really get a lot more clarity around so many everyday toxins that I was consuming. So I was, doing the experiment of cutting out caffeine or cutting out gluten or cutting out sugar. And so I had crystal clear clarity on what was affecting my mood swings or my ability to be patient with my kids past 4 p.m. And after cutting everything out, to face one demon that nobody wants to consider is really the problem, because, I was an extremely high functioning alcoholic, and nobody in the sobriety community, there's ironically a lot of division between people that consider, the different levels of alcoholism, or whether you went through AA or not, or whatever, which is why I kind of just stay away from that whole conversation. I mean, as spontaneous sobriety example, meaning I, finally just got, can I swear?
Go for it.
I finally just so sick of my own shit that I made the decision. And I think it's important that I made the decision to quit for a period of time. I don't think I would have ever decided to quit forever.
Right.
And I think that follows with everybody in every decision and habit shift that you make. You have to try it out.
Right.
And the likelihood that you're going to sign up for something for the rest of your life is very low. So it's like, I'm going to try it for, I think I said 3 months, or maybe I said a year. And previous to that, with the coach I was working with personally, I mean, she never brought it up, but I was just kind of like narrowing it down to other things that could possibly be negatively affecting my sleep, my mood swings, me not feeling my absolute best.
Right.
And it came down to previous quitting. A quote, which is a thing. It's arguably, people that are in what's called gray alcoholism or gray drinking area or problem drink, there's a need to put some sort of parameters around it for themselves, which of course is a sign or, symptom of being an addiction when you put rules around it for yourself. And so I, counted drinks and only drank twice a week, and had a lot of more awareness, if you will, about the quantity I was consuming and when, and also the quality.
Right.
I would only have an excellent red, and it would be easy to say no, all bullshit at the end of the day. So after it wasn't even quite a year. I just had one last incident, I guess, part of where I had a lot of clarity again with window of the kid being pregnant is I just 4 years didn't have the shame blame cycle going on. And also being around all these environments that I really enjoyed being around drunk, sober was very enlightening. Right? I think a lot of pregnant women can attest to that experience where people are really the conversation is not as intellectual as you think it is at this point in the evening. And just the ability, I can no longer sit for hours upon hours in the same place. Anyway, so I just had this moment, and, I don't know how much you want me to get into it, but it was a moment where I crossed so many lines as a child of an alcoholic. I just swore I would never do. And there have been all this sort of things culminating up to that point. I'd already had a few incidences where, we had a party one night and my son's referring to something, and I don't really remember well the conversation or the, what we agreed on. And just things that I'd experienced as a kid that I just did not want to model for my kids. And ultimately I just knew that I wasn't being my best self as a mother, being a high functioning alcoholic. So I decided to quit. I decided, X amount of time, and I never went back. And I don't go to AA. I don't feel, sure, there's the odd moment. My husband still enjoys wine. So sometimes we did wine tours in Napa Valley last September as our couples trip. And I fully enjoyed it. Did not have one sip. And it's sometimes I'll smell it and it'll literally just bring back all of the shame and all of the it's like an emotional trigger reaction.
Yep.
It's not like ooh, I'm physically craving this thing. It's like, no, it's just like this beautiful reminder of like, no, you're on the right path.
Right. That's crazy. What do you think is by making the decision, what do you think is the biggest lesson that it's taught you? Like in just making the decision that this was going to be that this was the path that you were going to take?
Well, I think it has shifted over like I'm now 5 years sober.
Sure.
So in the beginning, I just felt it more in terms of having so much more energy physically, so much extra time because you're never recovering.
Right.
You're planning. You're not interested in being at a party for 8 hours. Like you show up for 2 or 3 and then you're ready to go to. And so I immediately shifted into all that energy into running, which as a kid, I remember, one of my, I believe, high school teachers, she was an amazing woman. I loved her a lot, but she just offhandedly said like, yeah, I don't think you're cut out for running. And
oh, wow.
That stuck with me my whole life.
Yeah, right? I'm sure.
And so when I discovered yoga and like hardcore yogis will say running is for horses. The body's not actually designed to run,
that.
Which of
yes.
course is not true. And so I was surrounded by a lot of people here in Mexico. It's quite common that a lot of people train for half marathons quite consistently and randomly, like people that don't do anything other, like they'll train for a half marathon, do it, and then like not do anything for another couple months. Basically, I was surrounded by people that made me think this is doable. I'm curious. I'm going to try it. And so the shift was so all this energy, all this free time, and also all this new discipline and structure around doing something that was positive for myself, which I think as a kid growing up, like I just saw discipline and structure as something like militant or something for losers.
Yes. Yes.
And I could see like the massive transformation in myself. And I just found it, like kind of, I was going to say addictive, and I'm like, no, that's not the word. I think a lot of people do get addicted to it, but I think I was just, it was like the shit. And now later, several years into it, but it's more having I can feel now the effect on my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual wellness in terms of, for me, and like this is my experience with alcohol, of course, like I don't profess that this is the path for everyone. And, I do think most women could potentially reconsider their relationship with alcohol, and they might be surprised how it's holding them back in ways they hadn't considered, even if they hardly drink, but each to their own. But for me, it's hit home how much it held me back in my 20s and 30s of just constantly keeping me in this loop of self-doubt.
Yeah.
Or shitty about myself, and therefore want to go out and like have fun and numb out. And so I did that. And ultimately I'll often too much to drink, and I do something I regretted saying or doing. And the next morning, either I didn't really remember and it happened itself, or I would remember completely what happened. And I just, felt like there was no recourse. And so then I would continue like this, add layer upon layer of feeling like not great about myself. And it just made me feel, or kept me sort of in this limiting belief box, I guess, of what was possible for myself. Like I would never have, now I'm pretty much willing to try anything. And my capacity to, I guess what I'm trying to say is my vision for what I want and what I will try and go after and what I know I'm capable of is just massively bigger than 10 years ago or 5 years ago, stuck in this loop of the shame blame game.
Yeah. I think we get stuck in that in so many different ways, because that was leading me to my next question, because, and you kind of answered it there, but if you have anything you want to add, because, whether somebody listening is going through, maybe something similar with the whole like sober curious thing, or if it's just something else on their path, that there's like kind of how we started this conversation talking about how, like you said, there's no one size fits all, like we all have our own journey and stuff. But I like that you've highlighted these moments that have kind of been these big shifts for you, that you've been able to like recognize these shifts and then been able to see like what's on the other side from making this shift. And I guess my question is, do you have, I don't know if advice is the right word, but maybe it is. I don't know, advice, insight, whatever, on just those listening that they have an inkling that they need to make the shifts, but either we get caught up in, like you're saying, like the shame, blame, all of that, and that kind of keeps us stuck in kind of our limiting mindset or whatever, or we're trying to like cookie cutter our way into it and doing it the way everybody else is doing it. Like, I guess your advice on just kind of living your own path, but also like making space for these shifts to happen to make, open up new opportunities.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a lot that I want to say about that. I mean, I think first you have to consider that in the fact that there's no one size fits all wellness, the way in which I work with clients and that anyone needs to sort of discover what their own path is trial and error. So that's not what people want to hear. They want like, no, I know the answer. Here it is. Like, just do this.
Yep.
And in order for it to really, for you to know on a cellular level, if that's your path or the perfect practice for you or the version of yoga or whatever, you have to try a couple of weeks. And so as much as I think detoxes are, a wellness diet time, or a lot of people use them, doing a detox of whatever can be super informative if you're doing it with the intention of trying to learn more information about yourself on what makes you thrive. And so oftentimes these detoxes are like, oh, cut out everything, like go vegan vegan, gluten-free for a amount of days, which is, but then you need to be very intentional and strategic about how you're bringing things in so you can figure out what it is. You don't just go back to drinking coffee, eating sugar, eating gluten, drinking like all the same day or all the same week even. You need to be like, all right, so I'm curious how dairy affects my system. That'll be the first thing that I thread back into my life. And if all systems still firing, well, okay, so dairy maybe isn't my kryptonite.
Right.
And you bring coffee back in, a week or two later, and you realize like, wow, I really have a headache post coffee, or all the things that you could potentially be from drinking too coffee. Or it's easier to see, one cup of coffee is my perfect. As soon as I have two or three, that's when I feel the acidity in my stomach or my digestion's off, or, it's really impacting my. So we'll do this in a slow, gradual, intentional, informed, aware way. Well, is mine and mine own, but it's because I've done it over years. And so I'm clear, for example, that alcohol doesn't serve me. Coffee, a certain amount before 10 a.m. and not after. Gluten, if it's worth, I'm never going to eat some store-bought bread or plain airplane roll because it's just not worth the gluten. It's not, my system is like, no, this is not good. It doesn't taste good. Why bother?
Right.
Sugar is definitely a vice that I have to be aware of. Again, I choose quality over quantity. I'm not going to say that I don't eat sugar, but really, there's just so many things that you can experiment with. And I do think the one that most people don't want to consider changing their relationship with is alcohol. I mean, really, we're all addicted to something, whether it be coffee, sugar, alcohol. And I think what I'm optimistic about in terms of the alcohol piece and the sober curious movement is the last two generations actually drink way less than we did at our stage of the game.
Right.
And I think as women, I'm going to be 44 in a couple of weeks here. I think as women in our 30s and 40s who grew up with Mike's Hard Lemonade and, it was very intentional. The same ad industry that supported the nicotine, like the cigarette companies, were no longer allowed to market at all, and not in a lot of spheres.
Right.
And so those companies needed a new client. They went to big alcohol and they're like, hey, there's this massive market that you're not marketing to. Half the population, women. How can we sell more alcohol to women? And so that's when they brought in cute wine labels and Mark's Hard Lemonade and all of these drinks designed to be marketed to women. They intentionally and sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Very subtly was marketed to us in shows where there were strong characters that always had a bottle of red open at the end of their hard day, and just normalizing that kind of, and then, I haven't really specifically talked about the mummy wine culture, but every time I'm in the US, I find it shocking.
Mm-hmm.
The t-shirts, the tea towels, all the things with this idea that wine, self-care, or like earn at the end of a hard day, or it somehow helps you be a more relaxed parent.
Right.
Maybe that's true for some people, but it was never true for me.
Mm-hmm.
I was kidding myself. I mean, I was definitely pretending that to chime into those jokes, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if I was being honest with myself, like, I mean, I think I parented only a couple times in my life hungover. I was just like, no, this is like not doing this, not fair to them.
Right.
And really just, I didn't even want to like even buzzed. I didn't appreciate or feel proud of how I was parenting in those moments.
Right. Well, that makes total sense. And it's I think you said it so perfectly. I think everything you said makes complete sense for people. And I love the part about the trial and error because I agree with that because, so people come to me for, it's like, you have the answer, right? Like, tell me the one thing. And it's not that simple because everybody is different. And I think that's an important lesson to understand that you really do have to forge your own path, and it comes from trial and error and the awareness piece, like you were talking about with the certain things, because certain things are going to trigger people in certain ways, whether it's gluten or sugar or dairy or alcohol or whatever it is. But I completely agree with you on the kind of trial and error and forging your own path and just kind of bringing that awareness piece to the forefront and figuring it out that way for your own body. Yeah.
I think it's, kind of not what people want to hear. We live in a culture of quick fixes, and especially people that holistically, at least not going to pop a pill to try and solve it. They're a little bit beyond that, but they still want results quickly.
Right.
And sometimes it's just not realistic. You often have spent decades getting yourself in the current situation, and it's just not realistic to think that in 21 days you're going to solve all of the decade or 2 decades of damage or accumulated everyday toxins, like whatever it is that personally, kind of pulls your energy down the most.
Yep. I totally agree. I do have another question I want to ask you, and I love this conversation. I know there's so much more to learn from you, and I want people to go check out your Instagram page and your podcast and everything. So can you just let everybody know where the best places are to find you and just learn more about what you're doing and how you work in the wellness space?
Yes. Well, you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram as well as time at Megan Swann Wellness. It's also my website, meganswannwellness.com. I'm about to launch a new course. It's called Wellness as a Way of Life. It is a group program. We start in June. I'm very excited about it. It is literally, it's 10 years of my knowledge and experience, and it's just very potent and powerful. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations.
I've been creating it for the last year and piloting it with 8 incredible women for the last 3 months. And so this will be the first round through, and it's going to be incredible.
That's so cool.
If you're interested, you can always chime in the DMs. I'm happy to answer any questions. It takes you to the wait list.
Yeah, I love that. And that's an accomplishment. I mean, it's like birthing another child. So props to you. Congratulations. That's super exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. The question I want to ask you as we wrap up, the question I like to ask everybody, what do you think is the most important thing you can do to live with purpose?
Well, I'm going to say knowing what you want. So in order for you to really get that honed in answer on that, I think you need to be in a certain relative of good health in the physical sense, really taking care of yourself. And it's threading in some sort of mindful practice. So you can also get comfortable with being still with yourself. And then it's really tuning into your body, whatever resonates with you, your nervous system or your heart space, or just asking yourself, like, what am I a full body yes for? And really just figuring out what you want in life. And most of us want to have a purpose, right? Like you want to have a sense that you're positively impacting something. Like maybe you're a person who resonates with animals more than other humans, or the environment, or there's like so many things that you can positively impact. But I think when you're clear about that, that becomes your purpose. And it might just be being an incredible mom, right? Like that is an amazing purpose.
Yep.
And I'd say you can have more than one purpose. Just really asking yourself, one, not as today, but what do you want to leave as your legacy? What do you want out of this life? And that's usually a good guide to finding your purpose.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great answer. And I like to hone in on the piece that you can have more than one purpose. I also think that's a big thing. We limit ourselves to think this is what we're going to do and this is it. So I love that you said that. I love that. Such a good answer. Thank you so much, Megan, for joining and leading this such a good conversation about all of these, making these big shifts in your life and really forging your own path. This is just such a great conversation. I love it. So thank you so much for sharing all your insight.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Hopeful and Wholesome, y'all. If you found value in this week's episode, please subscribe on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a review to let me know what you thought. I love to know what you find useful in these episodes so I know how I can provide the most value I can to my listeners. And if you have topics that you want to know more about, I'd love to hear those as well. So shoot me a message on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. It's @TheHopePedraza or visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. Thanks, y'all.